about your end of life. Thinking and talking about end of life issues can be difficult, and putting documents in place can seem daunting. Today, we will showcase 3 ways to make planning ahead and conversations of end of life easier and possibly even fun. First, we'll spend a few minutes reviewing the Compassionate Choices, My End of Life Decisions, Advanced Planning Guide and Toolkit, which is a great useful tool. Then I will share about death over drafts, and you'll learn how you might be able to craft a gathering in your own community. And then I'm very excited that we'll spend most of our time together, the last of this half hour, playing the death deck and the end of life deck. To play, we have created polls that have questions from the cards in the game, and we'll ask you to select the answer in the poll that best represents your situation. We'll spend a little time discussing the responses after we show the polling and the polling questions, and we move on to the next question. So it's going to be pretty interactive. And if anyone is interested in purchasing this, either of these games, the death deck or the end of life deck, we'll be sending out a 20% discount code in the follow-up email. Throughout this webinar, we encourage you to ask questions, which you can add in the Q&A section, make comments, share feedback, and have fun. Next slide. Okay, so before we start, I want to check in with all of you. I know we say to have fun, but let's take a deep breath and settle in. I know I always have to do this when I'm running around and then coming to a webinar or talk on something in this subject matter. If possible, silence your phones and gift yourself this hour without distraction. If this is your first webinar with CNC, or if you've been fortunate to listen to others, you know that we lead with advocacy, information, and resources when it comes to end-of-life care. We acknowledge that entering these conversations, planning around death and dying, are both practical, profound, and can bring up feelings. So that's what we want to do, is we want you to check in to see how you're feeling now, and maybe how you're feeling at the end of our time together. So once again, this is just a friendly reminder to breathe and to check in with yourself. Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Angela, where she's going to go into the Compassionate Choices, an excellent user-friendly advanced planning guide. So Angela, how can you share with us how you use this worksheet? You're on mute.
Thanks, Stephanie. So if you've attended any of the previous webinars that we did for National Healthcare Decisions Day, you've heard me mention the My End of Life Decisions Guide. It's a booklet like this, and you can go either on our website and download it, or you can go on our website and put your name and your address in, and we mail you one of these. So this guide, it's about 40 pages. It's super user-friendly, but it will walk you through what your priorities for end-of-life care, you'll learn how to document your wishes and have conversations with your healthcare representative, loved ones, and doctors. So again, in the follow-up email, I'll send the link on how to get this guide. So I know some people like to just order it and go through it by themselves. What I like to do is actually get together with my friends, and we also have volunteers that will do this in like community workshops where they walk other people through this guide. I think it's really fun to do with my friends because it asks certain questions about your values it was just really interesting. I got to learn a lot of new things about my friends that I didn't know before. So the first thing I want to highlight is the values worksheet. So this is something that we recommend you complete before moving forward with your advanced directives, and really think about what's most important to you. Identify what brings you joy, what are your goals and values for medical treatment, and how you define life. And next. And so this guide will also provide different scenarios for you to consider. I know one of my friends had mentioned the reason why she hadn't done her advanced directive is because she was afraid that she would mark something and then not get medical care that she did want. So this question in particular, we really like because it will ask you to consider what kind of life-sustaining measures you want. And for her, she doesn't want any if she's in a permanent coma, but some of the others gets a little bit tricky, right? And next. So I did actually just go and take screenshots of the PDF. So like I said, it's super user-friendly, but what you'll see here is it will go over different treatment options at the end of life. And so this gives you kind of a easy to digest definition of what artificial ventilation is, how it works. And then the last two sentences say some people are given artificial ventilation and then slowly weaned off it, but many others are unlikely to recover the ability to breathe on their own. The longer a person uses artificial ventilation, the less likely recovery becomes. And so also in this guide, it has the decisions for specific therapies. And as you see on, it's off to the right here. And number 3 is, do you want artificial ventilation if I stop breathing? And now you know what it is. And then you can go and you can mark, yes, I do, or no, I don't want it. Or you can say, let's do a trial period, see if, my condition improves. And if it doesn't, then I want to be removed. Next. The guide will also go over who will speak for you. So how to pick a good advocate and what characteristics of a good healthcare representative would be. So you're looking for someone, it will teach you that you're looking for someone who's assertive, someone who's comfortable having conversations about death, and someone who's a good advocate. Also, a lot of people choose family members to be their representative, but this may not be an option for everyone. So the guide will go over who might be, different people who are alternatives to family members. So we also know that family can experience grief during a medical crisis, and they may not always be in the right emotional state to honor your wishes if they're in that emotional state. Or family members sometimes may live out of state, very far across the country. And so it might be better, as the guide will tell you, maybe pick a neighbor or a close friend, somebody from your faith community who can be with you if there is a medical crisis emergency. Next. And then, as we always try to highlight, having your wishes written down is a great first step, but the most important thing is to have conversations around it and keep having conversations about it. Next. And so the guide will also walk you through how to have conversations with your physicians. We always really suggest that you have these conversations with your doctor ahead of time, because it can be very challenging if you do get into some sort of medical crisis, or you maybe receive a terminal illness diagnosis, and then find out that your doctor doesn't support what your end of life options would be and what your end of life care, what your wishes are. And then you have to transfer and find a new doctor while you're also trying to deal with, trying to figure out, best course of treatment and stuff. So we always encourage people to have that conversation ahead of time. And then this guide will also include 3 addendums for your advance directive. So the first one there is the Sectarian Healthcare Directive. So this helps you avoid unwanted treatment and request a transfer if a hospital's policies conflict with your wishes. So an example of this is, we know that Catholic hospitals can give excellent care, but sometimes they have really strict policies around end of life care that, maybe don't align with what your end of life wishes are. So having this will allow you to be transferred to a different hospital that will honor your end of life wishes. And the middle one is the rider to the residential agreement with assisted living facilities. And this just adds your end of life stipulations to the contract when you sign in to move with them. And then the last one is the hospital visitation authorization form. And so this will list out who is important in your life that you want first preference in visiting you, whether or not they're family members. And this is really important for, members of the LGBTQ plus community to have this, just because you never know what kind of hospital system you might end up in an emergency. Next. And then the dementia provision, you can also complete this and then add it to your advance directive. But this is our dementia values and priority tool. And we've gone through this in another webinar. So if you missed it, you can go online on our website and you can find this one and it walks you through it. But what this does is it helps you identify your personal values and care wishes so that you can stay in control should dementia take hold. So this is a form that you would fill out. So I've already completed mine. So you fill it out before you have dementia, or you can fill it out when you do have dementia, as long as you still have full decision capabilities to make your own healthcare decisions. You can fill this out either in the guide, so people really like the paper version, or you can go online. We have this tool online as well. So this will allow you to provide clear care instructions to your loved ones and take the burden off them when you're no longer able to make your own decisions. This tool will ask you for about 15 value-based markers, such as if I can no longer bathe myself, if the only option for me is to reside in a nursing home, if I seem angry, but medication is helping, if I seem angry and I have anxiety, but medication's not helping. And then what you do is you select what level of care you want full life support. And then the lowest level of care would be, you want to receive comfort care, but withhold food and water moving forward. So our goal with this guide is really to empower you with tools and resources so that you can have the end of life experience that matches your values, priorities, and beliefs. And now I want to go back and have Stefanie Elkins share with you. And again, she's the founder of Be Present Care and Death Over Draft. And Stefanie combined her passions of craft beer and end of life conversations when she founded Death Over Draft.
So wasn't that fun, everybody, going through all the end of life decisions guide? That is a lot of information. Angela, thank you so much for doing a great overview of all the richness of what is in that book. And, it was a great overview. Now, how people go through it, it's a process. This isn't a one-time thing because there's a lot of information going on there. I just want to point a couple things out about this booklet in particular. One is that I love the trial periods in this. You don't usually get that kind of conversation of when to consider it. So I think that's a really good piece of the booklet. I also want to mention that if you are Medicare eligible or Medicare, there is an advanced care planning code. So the doctors and healthcare professionals are encouraged to have these conversations, and you can bring in the book and discuss it with them once you've filled it out or while you're going through it if you have any questions or concerns. Lastly, some of you might know I'm a family caregiver consultant and end-of-life doula. And so this is when I do my workshops on advanced care planning. This can be 3 or 4 sessions going over the booklet. So you can go over it with family and friends, but end-of-life doulas are also individuals that are very well-versed, and talking with somebody maybe more neutral than a family member or calling Compassion and Choices is another opportunity to really dive deeper into this. And they're used to holding space for those conversations. So moving on, taking a breath after that. Yes, Lisa wants to add something.
I just want to add how much, so I work as a hospice social worker still, in addition to my work with the Death Deck. And I can't tell you how many families wish they had something in writing for their family member with dementia, because it is often so filled with guilt and worry. And sometimes there are hired caregivers in place who really believe one way, and they persuade family members to, continue operating a certain way with food and water and all of these things. And if you spell it out clearly, you have the best likelihood that your family can really honor those wishes. And most families I work with wish that they had these conversations and wish that they had known prior to their loved one advancing into stage 3 or stage 4 dementia, where they can't have the same kind of conversation. So I just want to really encourage people to pay extra attention to that part of the workbook, because I think that it is incredibly valuable for the people who are going to be taking care of you.
Yeah, that's a whole, in itself, we could have spent that time on this. I mean, this whole seminar on that is the dementia and value priorities tool, and what a value. And that's just in the last few years that was created, and they really identify certain markers in time that you can really communicate on. So I'm so grateful that Compassion and Choices has created that.
And I just want to restate, because we have a couple of questions, we will send it out in the follow-up email, but it is on our website. So
great. So as we're moving on, wanted to take a pause and talk about what is your passion and what brings you comfort. These aren't normal questions that are on your advanced healthcare directive. These are things that are in the booklet and that we talk about to really get a sense of who you are. You know, natural sunlight, right? The sun on you, the touch, a healing touch of being outdoors, the smell and taste of coffee. I do iced coffee a lot too, but you know, a good mug of a latte is great. Seeing and being with dogs and their energy, and music, which is such a beautiful tool to change behavior and change your feelings and how you're feeling in a given moment in time. So next slide. So some of my passions are craft beer and welcoming conversations on end of life. If you haven't figured that out yet, is really bringing the two in and combining the two. And certain places that really kind of provide comfort to me are breweries. Breweries are kind of casual environments and spaces where people gather, family, friends, colleagues, pets, that are all kind of welcomed in. There's indoor, outdoor space. And I just really like these kind of environments that allow for open and honest conversations, even with the stranger that is sitting next to you on the bar stool. So those kind of environments bring me comfort. And so that's why I really wanted to tap into, go to the next slide, is combining those passions and creating Death Over Drafts, which is an opportunity, a community event to spark curiosity and conversation around end of life. It is a community event that is held at breweries and welcomes everyone. We are also creating community and opportunity for those in the end of life field to gather and reflect personally and professionally. Most of all, we want to have fun while having meaningful conversations with the overarching goal of destigmatizing, talking about the inevitable. We want to bring it out of the shadows and just create an opportunity of knowing that we all are going to experience death and dying, and talking about it in a way, in a place that is opening, just allows for better connection and communication, which this is about, talking about things. Next slide. So what are we talking about here? We're going to tapping into conversations and what you might expect at a Death Over Drafts. They're usually about 2 hours and are hosted at different breweries at different times of day, although I'm prone to happy hours. And up until now, most of the Death Over Drafts have been mostly in Southern California or on Zoom during COVID, but we are launching in other communities as well. One of the things that we garnered for much success at Death Over Drafts is partnering with the Death Deck. And so, as we know later today, this is where we're going to be spending most of our time on together. So you'll really get an experience of how the Death Deck can really engage in excel communication and conversation. Along with the Death Deck and their questions, I'm one that loves prompts as well. I like to tap into prompts. I love a good prompt. So here's me when you're being welcomed into the environment, because I think, once again, that's one of the most important, is that there's some prompts that are easily available. And I'm also one for name tags. So we you might be wearing a name tag at the event. Next slide. So here you are, there's after you arrive at a Death Over Drafts, get settled in, there's mingling that goes on. We'll engage in Death Over Drafts or the End of Life deck. And we might also have guest speakers, like we had Gabby Jimenez, the Hospice Heart, who focused on rituals together. Or we had Jennifer O'Brien, the hospice doctor's widow, who shared some words and reflection on her book, and we discussed that. Next slide. So once again, it is an opportunity for us to gather, for everybody that's curious or that works in the end of life space. And right now I'm launching an opportunity to invite others to be co-crafters with me, to partner and co-craft with Lisa and Lori and us at the Death Deck. And so if you're interested in not only participating, but co-crafting, I welcome you to go to deathoverdrafts.com or go to Cheers at Death Over Drafts and inquire about maybe this is a event or an opportunity that you might want to be involved in. Just like the Death Cafe and Death Over Dinner, we are beginning to welcome others to be part of this brewing community of people that want to change the narrative and experience around end of life. So thank you for the time, Compassionate Choices, for honoring this kind of work. Cheers to you all. And I now want to welcome Lisa and Lori to share a lot about their story and how they got started.
Yes, well, thank you, Stefanie. Thank you, Angela. This has been eye-opening for me too. I didn't realize as extensive as the book that was, Angela, that you shared, which is something that I never got to do. And that's really where this game came from. I'm one of the co-creators along with Lisa Pahl. And the game came out of the feeling unprepared after the death of my husband. So very young, we weren't expecting it. And he got a pancreatic cancer diagnosis and had about a year of that before we ended up with hospice coming to our house. That's where I met Lisa Pahl, who was the hospice social worker who came in along with the incredible hospice staff to help us through those last 2 weeks and 2 days of his life. I was one of the people who hadn't really prepared, although we thought we were prepared. When we decided to start a family, we went down and had the very basic of paperwork drawn up with the advance directive, but just the basics, none of all of those wonderful details that are so important, and I now know are so important to write down and have conversations about. So when he got his diagnosis, he didn't want to talk about any of it. So we never went back to the paperwork. And at the very end, he lost the ability to speak. So it left a lot of questions and frustrations and chaos, and led to, an ending that we weren't really able to be present in a way, because we were both sort of dealing with all of this unknown. So again, thankfully, Lisa Pahl came into my house and helped to guide through all of those things, and continued to stay on for bereavement support. And it got to a place where, we started having these really in-depth conversations about my experience and how Lisa sees it all the time. And she'll share about that as well. But, we just aren't prepared, and we really should be. And so we came up with this idea to, get to people early, get to have these conversations before someone's given a terminal diagnosis, before someone's in the end of life stages, and to start getting comfortable with the terminology, start getting comfortable talking to, our loved ones, and having ourselves look at this information and decide what we want in our own ending, and how we would want to orchestrate that when it comes. So that's where this game came from, to get out there and get people to begin having these conversations, get comfortable, and ice break, so that then when they sit down with these wonderful worksheets and booklets, they can start to put these on paper so that their loved ones know their wishes.
And when I had the amazing opportunity of helping Lori's family, because I'm still saddened to this day that I didn't get the chance to get to know Joe. Through my relationship with Lori, I know how much I would have loved this man. But, Lori's experience is, she was actually more prepared than most. They were more prepared than most. Most of the hospice patients that I see that are in their 40s have not done don't have life insurance, may have an advance directive, but they may or may not have a living will or estate, planning done. So on paper, as Lori said, they had they checked all the boxes. And again, like Lori, good work. You did make some decisions at that time that did help for your grief process and for the long term, especially we don't talk about that often, but the life insurance policies are something to consider, as it did lend Lori some opportunities to be able to fully be in her grief and spend some time in that process. And but at the end of the day, there were a lot of things that they hadn't talked about, how much pain medication Joe would want. How did he envision the dying process? Was this a spiritual process, or was this something that should be really medicated a lot? Or who would he want to be there? Did he want all the family coming by? Did he want it to be more intimate? We don't know what we don't know until we're in these situations. And so Lori and I came together and said, there's so much that people don't know unless they're in it. And so how can we help them begin to start thinking about some of these details that get lost? And there were some other conversation tools out there that we found to be really helpful. But what we were looking for is, how do we make it a little bit fun? How do we get it so that people will actually maybe talk about death and dying? Because it's hard to get people to, it's hard. It's one of these things that we all know we should all do, but taking that leap to do it is difficult. So we developed our cards to have multiple choice questions and add a little bit of humor, a little bit of levity to try to, try to make the situation to make it a little bit lighter. The last thing I'll say about that is that conversations about death and dying, it's not that we are born having an easy time talking about death. It takes practice, like everything else. It takes practice to have conversations that are a little bit uncomfortable. And so, I've had the wonderful opportunity to be at a lot of death overdrafts with Stefanie, and watching people have these conversations and open up and get more and more comfortable with the topic and share some laughter and stories. Not only does their comfort increase, but the connection they feel with the other people in the room is a beautiful kind of incentive as well. As a social worker, it always makes me really happy when I am able to be in a community with people having meaningful conversations, and we walk away feeling like connected to each other, feeling more like we have done something important with our time together. And I think that that's something that we don't get a lot in our world. And when I've worked in the emergency room and hospice for quite a long time, and I will say that when you are faced with a medical crisis or a terminal diagnosis, that's not the time that you have the emotional wherewithal, nor does your family, to start these conversations. So we just encourage people to start it at whatever phase you are in now. And it'll get easier and easier as the more that we practice these conversations. So that's what we're going to start doing next. Okay, so our first question for today, and this is going to be a polling question. So I'm going to read the question and then we'll do the poll. Regarding your important documents, will, life insurance, healthcare directive, A, my family knows exactly where to find them. B, they're filed together and should be easy to find. Or C, they may or may not exist. So good luck finding them. So now we're going to move to the polling portion, which might take just a second. So this question, we're going to give you a minute. If we would love for everyone to answer, and then we'll look at the results together.
I can share a little bit about mine.
Go for it, Stephanie.
So it's a work in progress. You know, they were in one place and now they're on my desk to kind of evaluate, because I'm updating my healthcare directive right now. So they are not easily able to find it, but I have a doctor's appointment in 2 weeks. So I'm going to be updating my advanced care directive, and then I will share it again. So I'm practicing what I preach in terms of trying to get them in order and update it, but I'm just being honest. And then, yeah, so that's where I am with mine right now.
So you're a B.
I'm a B. I mean, like, yes. And once
I'm
again,
a B
you're
with
not-
the goal of A. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have the results of that? Okay. Okay. So it looks like, I mean, almost half of the group has put them together, and they think they should be easy to find, but maybe they haven't specifically talked to their family members about that. And that's a great start. I mean, if you're a B, you're in good shape. I would just encourage you. You can even talk about this webinar and say, hey, you know, I have this folder and here is where it is. And if you send it in an email, I have learned that email is a great way to be searching for things. So that's just one step you could do today, would be to tell people exactly where those documents are. And great work for the people who are A, and the people who are C. I mean, it doesn't do any good to lie. So we appreciate that you haven't quite done it yet, and you're here today. And
today's a good day to start, isn't it?
Today's a great day to start. Yes.
Get your big green binder and put it on the shelf.
Yours is green.
It
Something
was
is
red. It was red, but I had them updated a couple of years ago, and the person who updated them gave me a green binder. So my kids know, they're sick of me telling them where the green binder is. We know, but it's there. So
I also want to encourage everybody, if you know that with your healthcare system that you're part of, I know you all have a My Health portal. Be curious if it's uploaded in your portal. Type in advanced healthcare directive and see if it's in there.
Yeah,
because that's the one thing. They're part of your team too.
Good point, Stephanie. Okay, we can go to the next one.
all right. So would there be differences in how your family would treat your medical condition if you couldn't speak for yourself? A, no, I've been very clear with instructions. B, they would argue but ultimately agree. Or C, yes, they struggle with choosing a restaurant.
So I would say, working with families in end of life for over 15 years, you may think that they wouldn't struggle in making decisions, but medical decision making brings out a lot of stress and anxiety and indecisiveness, and people typically family members struggle to get on the same page if there aren't conversations and things in place. Even if they're all good kids and all get along, we still have our own relationship with an individual, and we have our own ideas of what decisions they would want made. And so that's my professional insight into that question. I'm curious what the results are, though.
Good group here.
Yeah,
The Choices audience has done their work.
they've been very clear with instructions. Yeah, that's wonderful, especially ahead of time. So I think I mentioned I had no clue, no realization that my husband Joe would lose the ability to speak at the end. Of course, I was imagining that Hollywood ending, which we all know doesn't necessarily happen. So it's very important, as most of you are on board with, to let family know if that does actually happen and you can't speak for yourself. So yeah.
Mhm, mhm. Great. Okay, so this one is just kind of a curious question. It might be based on your life experiences. It might be based on your desires and how you perceive what you would want your ending to be. Timing wise, what would be the best way to die? A, instantly without warning or pain. B, within 3 months of a diagnosis, uncomfortable, but able to do a few last things. Or C, after a year of terminal illness, in pain, but time for my family and me to prepare. I'm always curious about people's answers to this question.
I know, me too, because my answer actually fluctuates. And with a lot of these cards, my answers change.
What is it currently, Lori?
Currently, I'm kind of middle of the road. I'm the 3 months. I don't want to have too much pain and suffering, but I would like that time to, say those goodbyes and do a few last things. So how about you, Lisa?
My current feeling is A. I think I'm at a moment right now of seeing a lot of deaths in hospice, and my dream at the moment is that instant, even though it might be a little harder for my family.
Yeah.
Oh, Lori, we have the majority of the group is aligned with your answer today.
I'm along with that right now too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll say my father-in-law died instantly. And honestly, I think that would have been his choice. And my mother-in-law died within 3 months of diagnosis. And we actually talked about it, and that is really what she would want as well. Obviously, we can't always control, although there are end-of-life choices that may impact that. But I think it's interesting sometimes what is the best fit for us and our personality is what happens in end of life. And thankfully we have end of life options to help us if it isn't in that plan too.
All right, next question. One of my favorites. Signs from beyond the grave are A, a comforting validation that souls live on. B, probably just a coincidence, I think, maybe. Or C, not real. Once you're gone, there's no way to phone home.
So Lori, why do you love this question so much?
I love this question because I get a lot of signs, and I still get a lot of signs from my late husband, Joe. And before I got them, before he died, I would not have believed it. I sort of have cycled through all of these answers, starting with yeah, no. And then when they started happening, it was just too specific. It could not have been a coincidence. And now it's very comforting to me when I have those moments and those signs. And I love hearing other people's stories of signs that they've gotten as well. So I think this is a really good one to open up conversations and start talking about death and dying, because it's not necessarily a point blank question of, what are your final wishes kind of thing. It's more of a fun conversation. So that's why I love it.
Oh, wow. This is quite a group here.
Well.
70% a comforting validation that souls live on. And then we have almost evenly split of around 15% of the other two answers. And I think that I think many of us go through the same kind of transgression that Lori does, of working your way up depending on your experiences with death. And it's actually been one of my favorite parts of working in hospice is hearing all of these stories, and so many people have a story. And
I actually have a story I want to share, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
So different signs in different ways. I have a good friend whose husband, when he was actively dying at the time, I sent a picture of a flower of her house as I was watching her kids when she was at the hospital, and I just decided to take a picture of the flowers outside in her house, just giving her a little, because like as I said before, I love nature and I wanted to share it with her. And she made a reflection on the purple flower and how that reminded her of, that was her late husband's favorite color, the purple. So every time I see a purple flower, I now share it with her. And it kind of sticks out. And like the other day, it was the anniversary of his death. And I'm like, oh, I would really love to be able to send her a picture of something today that would, I wonder if there's gonna be a purple flower around, as I was like walking. And of course I looked up and there it was. And so once again, these signs can not just be between you and the person, but also a way of sharing, saying you're not alone in these grief moments.
Can I share mine?
Yes.
I love
It's not as lovely as Stephanie's, but I do love it because my aunt, I had been planning, I live in Arizona, and I was planning a trip to go to Glacier National Park. And I was so excited. And like right before I was going, I was Googling like the best hiking trails, and all that was coming up was like bear attacks. And so I was like terrified. And they're like, you have to like walk with 3 people. And it was just my husband and I going. So like, I was like, oh, I was so scared. I had like bear spray. And then my aunt, she had been diagnosed with cancer, and they called me. I left on June 3rd to go to Montana, and they called me on June 1st and said that she had been moved to hospice. So I flew back to Michigan real fast, and she had been my caregiver for a little bit when I was growing up. And just like devastated when she passed, but she passed away on June 2nd. And then I flew back to Arizona, and my husband and I went and we drove to Montana, which I like cried the whole way there. So now I'm like in Montana, still afraid that these bears are going to come. And somebody I went to grad school with in Arizona checked in on Facebook that they were in the same area I was in. And it was him and his wife and their 3 kids. And they didn't even know that Glacier Park existed. And I was like, well, you should come. And then I was thinking, this is such a great sign, because my aunt was like my caregiver. And now I felt like she provided me all these extra people that I can outrun too. When we go hiking in Glacier National Park, and we did. And all together though, we all saw little brown bears. Well, luckily the park rangers were there too, but yeah.
Oh.
Being community.
So you saw the bear, and you helped everyone.
I tried to take pictures, of course. I did everything you're not supposed to do.
Oh. Well, and honestly, this question is one that we will often use at Death Over Drafts. And I have heard so many lovely stories over the years from this. And I think, you know, whatever your belief is about it, being able to share stories of connection and remembrance of someone with others is really just feels good and is valuable. So I think we're always eager to share, you know.
Thank you for sharing, Angela. And what
Yeah.
was your aunt's name?
Linda.
Linda. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll move on to the next one. If you could find out the age at which you'll die, would you want to know? A, yes, it would let me maximize every minute I have left. B, no way, that would send my anxiety into overdrive. Or C, only if it's happening tomorrow. This one is always curious to me because I think it tells a lot about a person, which kind of how they answer this question. I continue to be an A, even though I wish I would be a B, to be honest. But I really do love to plan, and I really do like to have all the information, and I kind of strive to be a B or a C, to tell you the truth, which I think Lori is.
I'm a C. Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of like the mystery of life, and but let me know if it's tomorrow. I do a little bit of last minute stuff.
Yeah. Well, it looks like a lot of people are like me, Lori.
Yeah, they are.
And then we have about
Half of them,
evenly
yep.
split with B and C. I think, and I think age plays in a little bit sometimes with this answer. At least what I have found is that my observation is that as we get older, we kind of want a little bit more information because it might impact our planning. Whereas most of the young people I talk to don't typically want to know.
Yeah, it's also interesting. I think when you get older, you feel like you're closer to, that death and dying, just as the aging. But I also think it's curious when you find out how old people's parents are.
Yeah,
They died, because that is such a marker for people of like where they, there's this kind of checking against others. And so I feel like that also is something to know, the age of the individual or how old their parents were in terms of their kind of lifestyle, or they've made it this far or something like that.
That's true. That's true. A lot of people I know have the idea of even generations. His dad died at 72 and his dad died in his 60s. And so my dad has this, like, once I get to 72, I can breathe, because he kind of has in his head that this is the longest an email has lived in his family. Wow. So I think there's a lot of things that factor in. But again, this kind of question is one that we will ask that's a little more removed. That's kind of just like, what do you think about this? And then it opens the conversation for people to share things like that. Oh, I'm hoping to get to this age because my dad lived to be this age. And then maybe you'll share a story about that. And again, all of this is about these conversations and practicing talking about death and dying, practicing talking about what we would want to happen, or and it all just kind of builds on one another.
As we know, it's not so black and white with these different prompts of being so rigid. And I know a lot of you that
Right.
might be listening are not even putting your answers in the Q&A. Sometimes I know people are really big chatters when we or Q&A are putting comments in there. So I guess you must be like really reflecting a lot on your own, or maybe you're with somebody else you're doing that with. But sometimes it's really good to engage, because it's not so, we had the polling questions, it's just a start.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, we can head to the next one.
All
I
right.
like this one.
One of Lisa's favorites. So you're approaching the end of life. Others are making your healthcare decisions. Should price factor in? A, yes, don't blow through my savings to prolong the inevitable. B, in moderation, necessary expenses are fine. Or C, spare no expense buying me every extra second. So Lisa, what is it about this one that you like so much?
I like this so much because I hear time and time again from hospice patients how mad they are about their savings being spent and having been spent on caregiving or healthcare that they didn't necessarily want. And I think that this question, we might have some judgments, and some people would say, how could you put a price tag on someone's life? But, many people work very hard with the intention of leaving something behind for their family, or they have their own value system based on the money that they made. And they don't necessarily want this money to all be gone. And they do want, some people do want decisions to be made based somewhat on finances, even though these are hard conversations. But I think this question is really important to talk about with a family, because it can alleviate some of the guilt from other family members when they are making decisions saying, Dad was really clear on this. Dad really didn't want us to go through this money. And we're looking at a very costly treatment that is saying it's not going to do much, you know, and I think it can really help people make the decisions that they intended. So it looks like we're evenly split here on this one. Between blowing through don't blow through my savings, or moderation, which I think is, you know, makes sense to me that we would be evenly split with that one. I know we're approaching the end, so we can just move on to the next slide here. Yes, that's you, Lori.
Oh, and you know what? Maybe we'll flip ahead because we're getting closer.
Yeah, we can go to a couple end of life questions.
Introduce one of the end of life.
Yes, there we go.
There we go. There we go. Which we hadn't really talked about, but this is, we have a new deck that we just launched last month called the EOL, or the End of Life deck. And it came out of the, I don't know, was it request or, of the healthcare community, because as much as they are loving the death deck and using it in like hospice settings, hospital settings, there are some times when it is in those settings that the word death and the skull are a little off-putting. So and some of the humor that we were originally trying to reach a broader audience before people were put in the position of having to have the conversation. So we softened it up a little bit. It's 55 cards, so it's a smaller deck, but it's all focused on questions with end of life. Mm-hmm. So this is one of the ones that we have. When it comes to human touch, I accept all hugs and gentle massages. B, handle with care. Please ask permission, as I may not be feeling it. Or C, hands off unless I request it.
I really like this question as a hospice professional, because when you are vulnerable and laying in a hospital bed, you lose a lot of autonomy, and people sometimes think they can just touch you and touch you however they want to touch you. And and so I think it's really great to be clear, both as a hospice professional myself with the patient, how comfortable are you with touch? Do you want me, do you like this? Do you not like this? And looking at our questions, we do have a mix of people. And I really like the 8% of people who said hands off unless I request it. We don't have to all be the same, and you don't have to accept touchy-feely just because hospice staff tend to be touchy-feely. And they may want to insert touch and you're not comfortable with it. So I think these are some of the nuanced questions that we really wanted to get to with the EOL deck, which was, here you're picturing yourself, or you are in a place of needing care, and what do you want that to look like? Yeah. I think we have time for at least maybe one more, would you say? Okay. And then this question, I think is crucial. And I like to ask this question of all my patients: how direct would you like medical professionals to be when explaining disease progression in the dying process? A, tell it like it is, all of it. Give me all the information. B, be direct with my family, but a little gentler with me. Or C, stick with the basics. I'd like to keep it a mystery. I don't really want a lot of information. So
this really goes into a lot of the cultural difference in
yes.
age and culture is not assuming what people would like. So I think a lot of that changes on, age and capacity. And, this could also be the healthcare agent is,
Ooh, this is not surprising that the audience here is an A. I was going to hypothesize that, but
okay.
But I am pleased to see that, because that really makes sense that that's how you would all feel. And that's kind of why you're here today, right? To get all the information and be able to put things in writing and talk about everything. So I applaud you all, because I think that can be very helpful in directing your own care.
Yeah, and letting the medical professionals know that you want them to tell like it is, so that they're
Yes.
not sort of trying to read the room or dance around
Yes.
sometimes bad news. So letting them know, hey, I want to know what this is, and please be honest with me and let me know what you know. So
Mm-hmm. Yes.
all right, do we have time for one more question, or should we
I think we should probably wrap up.
All
Leslie,
right.
can you go forward another slide? I also just wanted to say there was a comment. We got some really good comments on this too. And one of the comments was about, they felt like one of the questions was really two questions combined, and then they separated it out. And I think that is exactly what we want to happen, is like, these questions just spark more conversation. So how much money do you want to spend? And then this person had said, do you want to extend the time that you're alive? So these questions are really to prompt these conversations. So I'm glad to see that we're thinking like this. But yeah, thank you so much. I loved the death deck when I saw it. So I'm gonna go get it in the EOL, and I'm gonna make my friends play with me too. And thank you so much for joining us. And Stefanie, thank you so much for sharing about death over drafts and introducing me to these ladies. So I do also just want to state, if you liked this webinar, Compassion and Choices is funded almost exclusively by individual donors. I think it's like 96 or 97%. So, if you like this webinar and you have the ability to make a donation of any amount, we greatly appreciate it. It just goes to help our effort of expanding options and ensuring that everyone has the end of life that they want. So thank you all.
Well, thank you for having us today. We love Compassion and Choices and all that you do. And it's always so fun to be able to play the death deck and have these conversations. So thank you.
Be well,
All right.
everyone.